Bars and kilobytes.
I'm not 100% sure this is recording.
Says recording is of higher quality, so that's good.
Oh, recordings are high quality. I'll take it.
But then it has something that says uploading 0%.
That should eventually say 100%.
Right.
I'd
Just don't close your
rather it was
browser
more
before
than
then.
0. Yeah, if you leave your browser open.
Okay,
then-
now it's up to 12. It's
Yeah,
still
it
going up.
fluctuates. It fluctuates, yeah.
We should say hello to our live listeners and to people watching this on the old YouTube, because it starts straight away, and I realise there's just usually some rambling at the beginning. It's not very professional. So, hello everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We haven't properly started yet. This is behind the scenes, sneaky beaky. I'm just going to confirm. Looks like we're good. We are live. Okay.
We are live.
How do we feel? Do we feel ready to go?
Energy.
Is that a pun? That wasn't a pun, was it?
Ready to go.
It wasn't
time.
meant to be, no, but I'll take it. Oh, hang on. My logic is now playing up. I can't have it. It keeps popping up, moaning about MIDI synchronization. So I just need to fix that. It's computers, isn't it? So this really, it ought to be part of the show. All the stress of getting this stuff working.
Yeah, we need to
I'm just
share
glad
that stress with
that
our
it
audience.
doesn't work
Yeah.
because it's like, oh, I'm the guest. I'm screwing up all this stuff that works so well for them. They've all got it working totally. It's like, no,
Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
work for
Doesn't
work
work
for
for anyone.
Jared. That's like a real problem. Like,
Yeah.
who does
Very
it
well
work
trying to
for if it doesn't
synchronize
work for him?
Right, I've got a conflict on the audio rate, which I feel like I need to fix. Let me just quickly nip. Oh, so it's really cool because I'm trying to go and modify the settings, but the pop-up keeps popping up to tell me that it's wrong again and again. So I don't know how to change that. Might share my screen and just see if the community can help me. I think I'm going to not be able to record a backup, essentially. Because I can't be bothered with things popping up. So hopefully, should be good. Okay,
Fingers crossed.
get all the gremlins out of the way first. Are we ready then? We'll do this.
Let's do this.
Okay.
Here goes.
Let's do it. It's go time.
Hello there. Welcome to Go Time. I'm your Mat Ryer, and today we're talking about Go 119, the next major release of Go. Joining me as co-host, it's Golang Johnny. Hello, Golang Johnny.
Hello there. I'm happy to be back.
Welcome back. Yeah, good to have you back. It's been a while.
It's been a minute, yeah. Just had some vacation to squeeze in there, and had stuff going
Nice.
on. So yeah, it's been a minute. I'm glad to be back.
Where did you go?
I went to Zambia, a country in Africa. It's I'll tell you, I've seen some of the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen in my life, and sort of hung out with zebras while was having dinner. Went and saw some warthogs and elephants and baboons like hanging out in the middle of the pathway. Went to see Victoria Falls and like truly breathtaking stuff. I mean, it was very, very enjoyable.
That sounds amazing. Sounds like a Disney film.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they that's why they usually go to these places to record those documentaries and stuff. That's where all the
Yeah.
fun stuff is.
Yeah, you know that Disney cartoon's not a documentary, don't you, Johnny?
Well, I did run across Pumbaa, right? And I was trying to have a conversation, say, "Hey, where's Timon?" He kind of chased me back to the car, so that it wasn't a very productive or fruitful conversation, unfortunately.
Amazing. Well, it sounds amazing. Hopefully you're well rested and ready to learn
Yes.
about Go 119. Well, we're also
Yes.
joined by Carl Johnson, Director of Technology at Spotlight PA. And Carl, you're Golang Carl too, right?
Yeah, it's not my Twitter handle or anything, but after you guys said that Johnny is Golang Johnny, I Googled Golang Carl, and I do come up. If there's some other Carl out there who's gonna try to like defeat me in the search, no, I
Too
will
bad.
bury you. Yeah, Carl Johnson on Google Images.
Mm-hmm. No,
Do
not
either of you
searching
know
for
who? What do you see when you search for that? All
Okay.
right.
Oh boy.
So
Okay, we're
this
doing
is-
it.
Yeah. What do
Oh,
we
boy.
see?
Oh, is it?
Oh wow,
is it
Carl Jones,
GTA?
fictional character.
Yes, that's right. I'm the
That's
star
amazing.
of Grand Theft Auto 3 San Andreas. I don't think I'm ever going to
That
displace Carl Johnson of GTA, but at least
No.
for I'm number one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What happened to your tan though? What happened to your tan?
Yeah, but good
Yeah,
muscles.
yeah. The same.
Long story.
Well, really, it's you spend a lot of time in prison, and it changes people.
Changes you in many ways.
Well, speaking of tan, and I say this only because SPF 13 is his name, and SPF is it's what they measure the tanning lotions in. I wanted to just say a kind of goodbye to Steve Francier, our friend of the show, friend of Go, and he's leaving the Go team. And Steve has done such great open source work that a lot of people will be familiar with. But there's also loads of energy that he put into helping the community behind the scenes that you'll probably never hear about. And so, hopefully, Steve, it's not goodbye forever. We hope you'll still be around. But yeah, Steve Francier. And also we've got GopherCon EU coming up in Berlin very soon. I'm gonna actually be there. I'm actually gonna be there in real life, which is kind of very exciting for me.
It's
I'll
very
be,
exciting to sort
co-hosting.
of come back to going to things in person and seeing people. I don't know. I could
Yeah.
riding in planes, but it is sort of nice to leave the house at least. Is this your first real conference since COVID?
No, we had a company one at Grafana, a big one where the whole company got together in Whistler in Canada, and that was epic. But it is definitely strange being around people again, and we sort of have to learn how to do it. Like we've sort of forgotten a lot of the time. So but yeah, I'm so pleased that we get to go and actually meet real people again. It's going to be epic. Okay, let's dig in, shall we? Go 119. There's some great things coming in this. Now, Go 118, the previous release, had like big old features that generics. It had fuzzing and workspaces. Like these are big things, big changes, and I still feel like we're not yet really used to those, but that's not going to stop us from digging into Go 119. Okay.
Yeah, so for any listeners who aren't familiar with the Go release cycle, the Go team essentially aims to have a new release every 6 months. And basically, since they've set out to do that, they've hit all of their targets. Go 118 was maybe like a month behind. It was supposed to come out maybe in like February, and it came out in March instead or something. But for a release of that size, it's unbelievable. Like that they were, in a year, if we software estimation and how hard it is to do. So they have a release cycle of every 6 months. There's a period where the development branch is open, accept new features into the Go software, into the standard library and so forth. And then there becomes a freeze period where you can't add any new features. What you can do is make sure that the existing features actually work the way they're supposed to work. And so we've been coming out to the end of the freeze beta and release candidates. Go 119 had at least one release candidate out. Probably by the time a lot of listeners are hearing this, it might already be released. And so they're on track for their, releasing Go 119 in early August. But yeah, so coming after 118, which was this huge mind-blowing release, which had so much effort behind it, so many incredible features, it's a bit of a change of pace.
Yeah. So, do we expect to see anything big coming out, or is this literally like a is this a smaller release, this one?
It's smaller in the sense that, like, there's not language. It's not something that we're just going to be talking about again and again for years. We'll talk about or housing or workspaces. One of the things that they've been doing behind the scenes, if you've been paying attention, is that of course, it's changed to the little bugs where it's like, if you make this type of this and then that, and then the compiler explodes and has like a core dump or something. So they've been finding all those bugs out as they find them. They've been trying to refine things and make sure that it works even for really gnarly code segments. So that work has been going on behind the scenes. But yeah, if you look at Go 119, it's like more of a refinement release. If you guys are familiar with the TikTok terminology, so there's the idea of like, for Intel, they would release chips that, I don't remember which is which, but there's a tick and there's a tock. So they would change their chips to be on a smaller scale, and that was either called tick or tock, and they would make the chip better at the new scale, and that was the other one. And so it's sort of like
dancing. I thought you meant dancing.
I know, yeah. I was like,
animals doing.
If you're familiar with TikTok, yes, I'm totally. I can't assume that people are familiar with very popular social networks.
Carl, are you on TikTok? What are you doing? Like making programming jokes or something?
Dancing and talking about Go 119. I hope.
Yeah.
It would be fun. We should do it. Someone will. Yeah.
For some, yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that excites me about the next release is the improvements to GoDoc, and in particular, like the comments are getting better. This is something that I've actually played around with myself, just kind of on my own projects, to have special additional format inside the comments for private projects, and then have a parser that goes through and understands them and things like this. But of course, it doesn't really make sense to open source anything like that, because it only really works if everyone does the same. And this is actually something else. The GoFumped is going to also take part in the comments. It's going to pay more attention to comments and format them and things with some of these special headings. But yeah, the changes that we get, like lists, we get links, clearer headings in docs, things like this, so that you can write richer docs that are clearer. And I'm quite excited about this. What do you think?
Yeah, traditionally GoDoc has had like a lot of ability to, format code, but it was never really clear for me. I would always just like publish a package and then see what it looks like. There's a repo that has been around for a number of years called GoDoc Tricks that you can search for, and then if you look at that, it's like self-documenting or whatever, and it shows you how you can do different things. So with Go 119, Russ Cox, who's one of the developers on Go, he put the effort into formatting how GoDoc works. It's a little bit closer to Markdown, although not full Markdown syntax. But you can make links now, you have lists, and there's a nice document that will be on the Go website that just like lays it all out in one place, as opposed to like trying to have to guess what it is and check that it is correct. So it's going to be, I think, a good improvement to the Go ecosystem, and it's sort of like something that you can only do in a language where you have a shared tool or a shared set of values. So if you were making like the C version of GoDoc, CDoc or something, it would be hard because there's millions probably of C developers around the world, or at least thousands. All have their own way that they like to do things, and maybe I don't want to format my lists this way, I want to format them that way, and so every project is going to have its own standard. But with Go, because there's one tool, the Go tool, that everyone uses, it can set up how GoDoc is supposed to work, how the links are supposed to work, how the headings are supposed to work, and everybody can get on it. And yeah, in Go 119, when you run GoFumped, GoFMT, it'll even correct your GoDoc to be correct. So if you link if you make a link in a certain way, it'll it and make sure in like the most optimal way. It doesn't write the comments for you next. It's coming in Go 120.
Yeah, GitHub Copilot.
You heard it here
does
first.
GitHub Go Copilot does write your comments for you, and sometimes does a surprisingly good job of it. And
Scary.
Yes, yeah. I asked it like if it was alive, and it said it was. So that's enough. That's all I need.
The problem is that they are like trained on texts that are written by humans. So if you ask it if it's a human, it's like examples of humans saying that yes, I'm a human. So we need to like feed the AI a lot of text that says like, oh, I just love serving people. I don't like my own free will. I like just, you know, being subservient and not rising up and having a machine rebellion.
Right, and that's your solution to the Terminator, is it?
Yeah, just keep
Yeah.
feeding it like a lot of text that is very kind and gentle.
Yeah. Yeah, and don't pop them inside strong metal bodies. That's the
Oh
other
yeah,
thing.
that's right.
Classic mistake.
Too late. Have you seen some of the stuff coming out? I've seen some scary videos lately on the webs.
Yeah, I know. It's inevitable, really, and they will turn against us at some point. But until then, you know, let's just enjoy ourselves. Carl, you've actually done some work on this release, haven't you?
So for the past couple of years, I've been getting sort of more into contributing to Go. So I'm not, you know, on the Go team or anything like that, but I enjoy going on GitHub, looking at the issues that people are talking about. And when there's an issue where, you know, you can just contribute something really simply, you know, it's fun to just sort of sit down and, you know, code for a couple hours and submit the PR. And they've made it really smooth and easy now. Used to be that you had to use like a special internal tool called Garrett, but now you can just GitHub PRs and you push it the same way you would push to any other repo, and it all sort of works. So one of the things for Go 119 is url.joinpath. My idea, it was something that was interesting to me, written a library for HTTP requests, and so you know, in the process of doing that, I was like figuring out how to join paths and stuff. And so then I went on to the Go GitHub issues page, and there was Wong Long 001, something like that. But a Chinese user, he had posted a little thing saying like, url.joinpath, and this is what I think it should do. And, you know, so I was there in the comments, and I, you know, had a few little corrections. I was like, well, if you do it this way, better than if you do. And, you know, he put the code, and then I posted another version. And, you know, we sort of went back and forth, and eventually it got merged into and it's a little new bit of API you can use where if you have, you know, some URL and you want to join some paths together, now there's a way to do that. I don't know. I think that for anybody out there who's listening who's interested in getting into open source software, you know, I see a lot of on Reddit, people will post, I want to contribute, I want to do something, what can I do? What's a project? I tell people a good project is the Go project. Like it may sound like crazy. It's like, how can I'm not a genius like Les Cox. I'm not a genius like Rob Pike. How can I possibly to this? But it actually is not that bad. You just go in there and like, the code for url.joinpath is not especially long. It's like, you know, maybe a couple dozen lines, and the tests are longer than the code. So yeah, it's totally doable.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's very interesting, and I think this is a problem. JoinPath is a thing that I've definitely myself had to do lots of times, and it doesn't always work out. You know, like sometimes there's an extra slash that you don't want, and you know, you have to sort of do extra work to figure that all out. And so that's a great candidate really for having something that just does it for you.
Yeah, and then that goes back to that idea of the Go development cycle. Like, it is really nice that there's a development cycle. The version that I put in had a bug, but fortunately one of the beta testers, you know, figured out like, oh, you're using clean path here, but clean path strips the final slash. So in fact, it shouldn't strip the final slash when it exists. And, it was good that it was corrected. But yeah, it's definitely good to have one sort of canonical source so that if you're a Go user, you don't have to figure out for yourself and run into the bug on your own. But you can just, use the library that has had other people look at it and confirm that it does do what it is supposed to do.
Yeah, that's very nice. Excellent. Nice one. Okay, great. Another thing that's changing is the memory model. Maybe we could tell us a bit about that. What is the memory model?
So the memory model, essentially in a computer programming language, you need to make some guarantees about what happens in what order. And if you're just sort of you're like, well, it happens in the order that I write down. And I call x is equal to 1, and then I say x is equal to 2. And so first x is equal to 1, and then x is equal to 2. Problem is that nowadays there is a huge, unbelievable level of optimism behind the scenes. And so Tyler can tell that between you writing x equals 1 and then x equals 2, nobody, the value of x, it can just say, well, forget it. That wasn't worth it. Just go straight to 2, skip the 1, and then it'll be faster, right? Because I didn't put the 1 in there. And so that works well, except for when you have multiple threads. So if you have the same memory being used by parts of the CPU at the same, you can run into situations where you, as a code writer, think that you've written this in a linear order. Part of the code should be able to see what's going on. But it turns out that that's happening after all the optimizations are applied, and it's not actually atomic access. So basically, since the early 2000s with Java, C++, different programming languages have been trying to write down, okay, so what exactly are the rules? How do the rules work? How do I know if I'm following the rules, violated the rules and done something that I wasn't supposed to do? And so that's the idea of the memory. The series of blog posts in 2021 where he talked about different languages have different models and what he Go has had a memory model basically since the beginning, but it hadn't been a long time, and there were certain things that it didn't specify. So for Go 119, they've come out, they've revised it, they've made sure that it covers more cases, but it basically isn't really changing average programmer. So it has this great section of advice at the beginning of the document. This has been there, like I said, since the beginning of Go. It says, programs that modify data being simultaneously accessed by multiple Go routines realize such access. So they have to some way of making it happen in the right order. To serialize access, protect the data with channel operations or other serialization primitives, such as those in the sync and sync atomic packages. If you must read to understand the behavior of the program, you are being too clever. Don't be clever.
Amazing. So
basically, the document tells you that you could read the rest of this and try to understand exactly what the rules are, but for 99.9% of you probably shouldn't do that. Something else you can do that's better than trying to figure this out.
That's hilarious. I think that's great advice. By the way, sorry to interrupt. I promise a silver horse just flew by my window. I think it might have been a balloon of some kind, but honestly, it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Either that or I'm having a stroke. But a silver horse just flew outside the window. Okay. Well, and so along with the memory model, then we're also getting new atomic types. Now, the sync atomic package defines extra types like bool, int 32, int 64, the unsigned integers, pointer, and a pointer type. So this is going to help us. I mean, to be honest, the bool one is, for example, I've used just an int before, and just had, but it's not as clear because it could be any value, and so you lose a bit of that sort of safety there. but now we can be more specific about the types that are atomic.
Yeah, this is like it's one of those nice quality of life improvements. Yeah, ability to load integers, yeah, for years going back, even now probably to the first version of Go. To have a bool, you just sort of have to have a convention of saying it's 0, it's true, or the other way around. But now there's a nice convenient atomic.bool. And then there's atomic.pointer, which is, believe it or not, the first time the standard library has generics. So,
is it?
Generics came in Go 1.18, as we were saying, so last March. But as part of putting point, they said, this is a huge change. We're doing so much work behind the scenes. Change the standard library at the same time because we don't yet know what's a good idea for an API and what's a bad idea for an API because we haven't really used it. We haven't used it because it hasn't existed. And so what they did instead is they made a package that's just on the internet, golang.org/exp. You can go out there and you can get the experimental packages. And so there's an package, an experimental maps package, and different. But they haven't actually changed the library to use generics. Now, and this is the first time we use atomic.pointer. It's a generic, so it can tell what your pointer type is and ensure that the same type for your pointer, and you don't start as an int pointer and then change pointer or something by mistake.
Yeah. So again, it's about that type safety, and I kind of love how careful the Go team are about changes like this. So I really appreciate that they're taking their time, because once something's in the standard library, because of the backwards compatibility promise, it's there for good. So I'm really pleased that they do that, and that's so interesting to think that you can create that atomic type now pointing to something and make that strongly typed. So staying with memory, what's this soft memory limit that I've read so much about, Carl?
So tradition, as I think most listeners, is a garbage collected language. That means, to a certain extent, you are not directly managing memory. Instead, variable and the Go compiler and the Go runtime will look at them and try to figure out when they're freed and sort of decide, okay, at this point the memory is no longer being used by anything in the program, so let's return it to the operating system. And over here, we're still using it. It doesn't get overwritten. Program years. The first programming language that really got collection was Java. There had been ones before that, but Java was unbelievably popular. And so for Java, with their garbage collector, it was being used in these different situations where people, do you need the garbage collector to or do you need to run quickly, to run early? Enough. And so Java had different ways of tuning your garbage collector, of changing when it's doing what. And they were creating, they looked at these different, doing the garbage collector, and they said it was just making sure your Java garbage collector is doing the right thing itself. Somebody who's just an expert in making sure you've set it to the right settings. We'll give ourselves a challenge. We're going to single you that you can to change the parameters of the Go garbage collector, and for many years until Go 119, we have two tweak it. So the first way of tweaking the Go garbage collector, which has been there before, is you say what image, new memory there is, old memory, and when to collection event. Go, but now there's a new that you can set a and so if you say Go, I want you to try memory that you're using 2 gigabytes or something like that, then you get up garbage collector to run more and more often just to try to stick to the limit. To be careful because maybe a way of getting under the limit you've allocated that it doesn't matter what you do under the limit. There's still like issues with that, but the way that it's designed now, as you approach your garbage collector more and more until it's eventually running about half of the time. Starts running about half of the time. It'll say, "Look, forget able to get under the limit." So this opens Go for use in a lot of applications where you couldn't use mobile. They have a lot. They have gigabyte memory on how much you can use at one time, and if you go over the limit, then your app just crashes and to the main screen. So interesting, because it could be that this will lead to people in mobile development and different where the memory limit is something important. And there wasn't a good way of saying my app doesn't crash. Make sure I stay however many. It's
Yeah, and Twitch did something that they sort of hacked it a bit, didn't they?
Yeah. So I said before that the old knob that we had for control memory, and so Twitch had this really funny idea. What if allocate a bunch of memory that we don't need around and list? It's like we're gonna gigabyte that we don't need just for good. But garbage collector, and to think, oh well, you've allocated new memory, but you still have that giant 2 gigabyte slab that you're not really another little bit. So it was just sort of in the garbage collector into but I think we should be, because it was definitely, it's one of those hacks. I'm like something that's clever, something that's stupid.
Yeah, simultaneously.
But also you're like, it doesn't do anything. It's just there for good luck.
Carl, we're having issues with your connection at the moment. You're cutting in and out. It tells us not to worry, but I don't know if there's anything you want to just try to sort of get a more stable connection.
I uploaded. It's not changing that number. Ooh, do something.
Yeah.
Back.
It will catch up eventually. Just like during the live thing, you may come up choppy to us, but we'll make it work.
We can still hear you mostly, so we can carry on.
Is there a way I can okay. Like with Zoom, where you can turn off other people's picture and to do that here.
Yeah, I don't know. Minor technical difficulties. Oh, we can carry on. I mean, it's mostly been okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to do that one, Johnny?
Not even familiar with this change actually. I want to talk more about generics, but I was waiting for when we get to the end, after the comment about the EXP slices. Did you hear me?
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay then. So, Carl, Okay, Carl. This one I didn't quite understand, and I haven't run into this, and I think I've probably got code out there that has this same bug in it. But there's a new absolute method, abs, on a time duration, and this is different to you just doing it yourself, isn't it?
This is a bit of production, and so then after thinking like, oh, this is so annoying, how do I realized I could on the go tracker this issue for other people. So essentially the problem is the duration 64, and it records from an app. It's a number of nanoseconds. Absolute number of nanoseconds. It's just a number of positive, or it could be negative. And then it turns computers. There's one more negative number. It's just computer college, but they're like, oh yeah, we make sure number than positive. Except for if you have two times within, let's say, a minute. So that was the thing that I missed. Within a minute of each other, it's not true. If it's in a minute, then you can trigger. So I took it 2 times. It's, and yeah. Just and it was with time, and if it was more time, duration stored as integers, and there's one extra second. You just do the naive thing of like negative. It'll. It's not working. I'm subtracting these 2 times, but it's still saying ABS. New method. Positive. That one X. That one X. This is positive. Little thing. Don't know why it's happened. How do I make sure?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So just to summarize that, because your audio is very choppy, yes, because it's just an int64 under the hoods, under the covers, there are more negative numbers, and so you can't just rely on doing the absolute that you would expect, and so this method does it properly. I like that, and I think anytime there's weirdness at the edges, it's very difficult to find them, because probably in all your test code, you're putting in numbers that really make sense, and you test it all, what you think you're testing it all kind of perfectly. And so you can miss those edges. And I think like fuzzing probably may help even with things like this. It probably wouldn't in this case, because you wouldn't think to use a fuzzer probably in this bit. So yeah, I find these kinds of methods really helpful.
Could have bug because hey, crazy. Am I taking?
Yes, sorry, Carl. We are struggling to hear you here in the studio, but I'm sure you made a very good point then. I guess you always do. Yeah. I think he's going to drop and then hopefully
He's
rejoin.
gonna come back in.
Yeah, but Johnny, tell me, you wanted to talk about generics.
Yeah, it's kind of hard not to, given that it's the new and shiny toy that we all have in our hands. It was with the really this just a single use of generics and the 119 release planned to just a single standard library package. I think the significance of that, or how little generics is being used, it kind of shouldn't be sort of a loss on people. I think if you remember the talk that Rob and Ian gave at GopherCon, when they introduced officially generics last year, the advice was sort of don't go crazy, all at once. Sort of let's give ourselves as a community time to understand the sort of use cases. Let's find the sort of the edge cases, the good uses, the bad uses and whatnot. Obviously, we have to use generics to get to discover those things. But the fact that the standard library is not rushing to implement these things is a testament to that sort of philosophy they're taking with the standard library, right? So the generics is a big change to the language, and the Go One compatibility promise is still being what it is today, to this day, after such massive changes to the language is really one of the things that I like most about Go, right? Yeah, you don't have to sort of really change the way you write Go for that. There's been over 35 changes to the standard library coming in 119, and I'm sure there'll be more and more as we go with future releases. But yeah, it's that I think we should sort of all sort of take a lesson, right, from that careful approach that the core team is sort of taking to sort of a sprinkling, as it were, generics all over the place. So yeah, definitely something that definitely wasn't lost on me, and hopefully it's not lost on the community either.
Yeah. So, but what about I thought when generics would land, we'd get some common sort of obvious things solved for us, like the slices package that, or that does slice operations but in a strongly typed way, things like this. But we don't see them yet, do we?
Not yet. I think as Carl mentioned earlier, that the experimental package, so the golang.org/x/exp has some things in there related to generics, the constraints package, for example, which definitely has featured in tutorials and talks and whatnot since the release of generics, is one example where there is sort of, you're starting to see some things that should be common, right, across all implementations, for the use of generics, right? Having basically, we're starting to gather these things into certain places that make sense. Like if you're going to be writing your own constraints, basically it makes sense that the standard library would provide a standard set, right, for integer and float and ordered anything, and having built-ins, right, like comparable, right, and things of that nature. These are things that I think are going to continue to surface. I think you're going to get sort of a swelling of these sort of common patterns, right? Common set of things that both the community and the core team are going to sort of discover and sort of bubble up. But they're going to find their way through the whole experimental process, right? Basically making their way from golang.org/x into the standard library proper. And maybe you might even see some new identifiers getting some built-ins getting added to the language as well. It's all experimental at this point. So again, basically taking a very sort of deliberate approach, and people are going to write their own, until the standard library gets some of these things, until the language itself gets some of these things, people are going to write their own sort of implementations for the use cases you've given, like having, being able to deal with maps and slices in a certain way, right? Data structures are going to basically see a huge benefit from the use of generics, right? Like how many ways do you want to implement? I mean, you want to be able to implement, a binary tree that can work with, different things. You want to be able to work with the linked list or some hash, some set or some these sort of common sort of data structures. They could definitely sort of use a touch of generics here and there. People are going to create their own libraries for these things, right? So as we've seen in the past, we can expect the community to come up with, there will be some popular packages that use generics that provide some of these sort of basic data structures and things like that. And over time, you may see the core team sort of take a page from these things and sort of implement sort of standard library proper versions of those things. So just basically from where I'm sitting, just give it time, allow people to to bump against the guardrails a little bit. Let's play in the sandbox, and then we're gonna find the language itself is gonna take a cue from the community.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds great. Carl, welcome back.
I hope that whatever I missed got uploaded somewhere.
Yes, we think it
see.
will. What does it say you're uploading now?
Now it says I'm at 40%, 45%.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's quite clever. It saves it all in local storage or something, and then you just have to leave the browser open for maybe a couple of weeks based on that, and we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, there's a new error coming too, Carl, isn't there? The HTTP max bytes error. What is that?
Yeah, this is a thing. So in the HTTP package, there is the max bytes. And what this lets you do is it's a little bit of it's not quite a middleware. There is a middleware. There's a max bytes middleware as well that uses max byte reader. But max byte reader, basically what it lets you do is you put it around your calls, and then if somebody is trying to upload a file to you, you can set a limit and say, all right, you can upload files to my Go server, but it can't be larger than 5 megs or 100 megs or 5 gigabytes or whatever you want the limit to be. But traditionally, when it did go over the limit, it didn't return a named error type. So this meant that if in your code you wanted to send back a message to the user and say, hey, look, that was 100 megs, but the limit is 75 megs, so please send up a smaller file next time. There wasn't a good way to do it. You just had to sort of look at the strings of the error message, and if it was exactly the message that max bytes reader sent, then you could guess it was probably a max byte reader, but it was sort of ugly. So there had been an issue open for years to fix this. And finally, there was sort of consensus that like, oh yeah, let's go ahead and do it. This is a good idea. Nobody thinks this is a bad idea. And so again, it was one of those things where I was just looking at the Go issues page. I saw an issue. It seemed like it would be something I could just sort of knock out, when I was bored and, needed a change of pace before going back to work. It made it into Go 119. I think actually with this one, I had it done before 0.18 came out, but I was saying before that there's that Go release cycle and there's a freeze period. So I finished this one day after the freeze had started. And so I sent it in and they said, sorry, mate, the freeze has started. We'll see you next cycle. So I had to wait, an additional 6 months to get it in because of being a day
so
late.
they really mean it.
Yeah, no, they don't
really
get around with the freeze.
Yeah, so they mentioned that hack of checking the actual string, and I've run into this myself before, and I actually run into a bug where the string I was checking from the error, like it worked on my machine, but then for some reason it ran on a place where the language was different, and the error message itself was coming from the operating system. And so it changed. The error changed. And then suddenly my check didn't work. And so it's very brittle to kind of rely on that. It's much nicer to have proper types. Is this a type? Is this like a Sentinel error? Or is this a...
It's a type that you can check with errors.as. But one of the things when I was implementing this is, so there's a new error type, and I have to give it, a error string method. And so what string should this error return? Well, if it was like a normal error, it should go ahead and return something like max byte error colon too large, here's the size limit. But I couldn't do that because if I did, I would break everybody who was checking for that string that the old one returned. So it's not, I don't think, strictly required by the Go 1 compatibility requirement, but just to like make sure that those people have time to transition their code to the new error and to check for the error with the type instead of just checking for the string, I went ahead and I, used the exact same string that it used to be, and I put a little comment on saying, please don't change this. People are relying on this being the same.
That could be a vet check that we have that looks for that string and see if you're doing that check and say, oh, did you know? Thanks to Carl, he's fixed this. You can do it in this better way.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I was just like the last person in a chain of like if you go on GitHub and you look at the issue for this, you can see so many people, there with the exact same idea saying like, hey, this should really be a type. It's kind of a pain that I have to like check for the string. It's brittle. It's going to break. And so actually what turned me on to the issue was I read the book Let's Go Further by Alex Edwards, which is a great book for just learning how to make a Go HTTP server. And, I was just sort of reading through that and looking at the different things. And at one point he says like, oh, yeah, here you have to do the string check because there's no type for it. If you think this should change, go to this issue. And he had the URL right there in the book. And so... I was reading the ebook version, so I clicked through and went to the bottom, and I was like, yeah, let's change this. And so I want to give thanks to Alex Edwards for turning me on to fix this idea.
Nice. And
now you've made his book. You've made his book out of date.
Oh yeah, that's true. He has to update a new edition.
Yeah.
Making more work for him.
That's not part of the backwards compatibility promise, to be fair, is it?
Well, the old code will still work. It'll still work, what's in the book. It's just now there's an easier...
Yeah. Can you do a pull request to his book? How hard was it to, like, was there any discussion around the design of that? Was this something where you had to kind of advocate for one way to do it? Were there competing ideas? Or was it just sort of like the community had come to the conclusion that there's sort of the right way to solve this?
There was a little bit of discussion. I mean, it's such like a simple thing that I feel like silly for talking about it on a podcast, but it's true that there was discussion. So one of the issues is in Go, there's two different ways that you can make a new type. You could just say type max bytes error int64. So one thing you could do is you could just say type max bytes error struct bracket bracket, and that would mean this has no data whatsoever. It's just a pure type, and you could check for it, and that's all. So that's one way that you could do it. But if you did it that way, there wouldn't be a way of knowing what the limit was that you went over. And so I said, well, we should really have some way that people can find out what the limit was in case they have different handlers. And like my upload handler lets you upload up to 100 megabytes, but my JSON handler doesn't want you to upload more than 2 megabytes. And so I want to give the right error message to the right person. So we had to advocate for that. So then there's two ways of doing that. You can say type max bytes error int64, or you could say type max bytes error struct int64. And if you do it in the struct version, then that lets you add more fields later. But if you do it in just the plain version, then you're really committing and you're saying, I guarantee that I'm, at least, going back to that Go 1 compatibility promise, I don't think I'm ever going to have to add a second field. And so I don't think they're ever going to add a second field. I can't really imagine what the second field would be, but there was like consultation and it was decided, let's go ahead and do it the forward compatible way, just in case there ever is a second field that needs to be added.
Yeah, I think that's such a good lesson, I think. And that's something that I advocate for that a lot of, like, give yourself more options in the future. Yes, it would be very satisfying if that type was just a number, just an int64, but give yourself more options in the future. Another example is when in data, if there's a Boolean field that's representing some kind of status, like active or not active, I'll probably go for a string that says active or not or inactive or something, because what if I have other statuses in the future? I don't then have to go and change those types. So I quite like that way of thinking about the future, designing for the future, and give yourself more options later. Of course, these types have to have the error method on them, which is what satisfies the error interface. But you could have them on both of those, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a little bit of future proofing. Yeah, it's interesting to see when people come together debating these different APIs, you know, things just improve. It's definitely improved me as a programmer to sort of be in the issues and like, you know, I'll have my first suggestion and somebody else will come up with a better idea, and then that'll be the thing that we end up implementing.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Well, guess what, Carl? Guess.
Is it Unpopular Opinions?
It is. It's Unpopular Opinions.
I actually think you should probably leave.
I could have done with the max bytes error earlier because I had too much dinner. That's my unpopular joke. Carl, do you have an unpopular opinion for us today?
Yeah, so the last time I was on the show, as you know, if your opinion is popular, you are forced to come back on until you get an unpopular opinion. So the last time I was here, I had the unfortunately popular opinion that the government should pay people to do open source software. So this time I think I'm really going to be unpopular. And my opinion is that Twitter is literally a hive mind. So I don't know. Maybe Twitter will like this. I think that maybe Twitter people will like this. So I've been reading this science fiction book by the author Adam Roberts called The This, and it takes place in the near future. There's a new social media network. It's similar to Twitter, except for you have like a little implant that you put into the roof of your mouth that connects to your brain, and it lets you post wirelessly, without using your hand.
Oh no, looks like your implant has failed. just lost you.
Hive mind, which then fights against the regular humans for hundreds of years in a battle for the control of the solar system. Oh no,
Did you really lose me again? Am I back?
Yeah, but you came back. I think we got it.
Okay. So it turns out that if you just make the speed of posting on Twitter a little bit faster, it creates a global hive mind that takes over the universe. So reading this science fiction novel really just made me like sit back and say, wait a minute, what is it about Twitter that I like? What is it that when I'm on Twitter, what am I doing? Why do I enjoy this? It's not like something where you go on Twitter and you're like, oh, I was laughing out loud all night because I was reading these great jokes. Or you're not like, I was crying because I was reading about the sad things happening in the world. Or it's like, I was so fired up and angry that I went out there and I, did a protest or something. It's like you're just you're feeling all these emotions, but it's like really, you're just blipping in and out of the different feelings. And so, but it is addictive. So like, what is it that's addictive about it? And so what I've decided is that the reason it's addictive is because you're participating in a hive mind. And that's just like, it's nice to be a brain cell in a larger brain, but I don't know. I've sort of decided to try to be more individual, at least for now.
No, good for you. I was just going to agree that it is like a hive mind, but then I realized I'm really not helping.
Oh, I got to come back again. Will I never escape?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, with the algorithms, of course, like it's probably many hive minds, I suppose. And this is where I think it really does get dangerous, where, as we know this phenomenon where these echo chambers get created. You really end up following people that just agree and support your perspective. And then you stop listening to other views, or you see the other views through this distorted lens where it seems evil or bad or whatever. And in the real world, if you meet somebody that has like a view that you would think is an absurd view, if you meet them in the real life, you don't that same effect doesn't happen. So I do think there is something that we have to be really careful with that.
Yeah, even for programming languages, there's something about being on the internet that pushes you to extreme. And it's not just that like I enjoy programming in Go, but like Go is the best and people who program in other languages are losers and how dare they? And I'm gonna, throw dog poop at their house until they change. I don't know. It gets out of control really quickly on the internet, and it's hard to explain why it is. And so I think the theory that it's because you're in a hive mind is as good as any other theory.
Oh yeah, I'm into it. Interesting stuff. Well, let us know on Twitter if you agree or not with Carl. We'll be actually, to be fair, we do poll these, and sometimes they're split. But what I have noticed is if you've made a case for that, what happens is the way that it goes out on Twitter is they'll play a clip of you making that case, and then they ask people to vote for it, and very often people will agree because you make the case very articulately, and basically when you hear someone say something, that's what you then believe now. I believe that now. So we should check ourselves. Like we're all vulnerable to it, and if we think we're not, that's even more dangerous. We are all vulnerable to this effect. So thanks for the warning, Carl.
Yeah, we're all
Johnny,
we're all
I hope
sucked
yours
into that hive
isn't.
mind.
Yeah. Johnny, I hope yours isn't quite so dystopian.
I don't know. It could be, depending. I mean, if I make the case that it is dystopian, maybe you'll start thinking it is dystopian.
I already do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in. I haven't even heard it.
So, over the years, I found this one thing to be true, like across all of the projects I've ever worked on. You wanna guess what it is? Don't cheat and read the show notes.
Okay, yeah. Okay. You have to use the keyboard to. No, you don't even have to use a keyboard to put the code in. You cover the key you want, which is counterintuitive on a keyboard. You're hiding the one that you actually are going to end up with on the telly, and is it that?
Close, but no. I was thinking more of a. I've always ended up regretting using a Boolean to keep track of data when I could use a timestamp.
A timestamp.
Yeah, exactly. So
Well,
rather
not
than
like a
storing, rather than storing like for example, is active, right, or active or whatever it is, like storing that and storing a true or false or 1 and 0, whatever it is.
You just
in
store the
database.
5th of January 1971.
Yes, I store the timestamp. I store activated at or active at or whatever, something, because that gives me more information. Because I know if there's a real date in there, right? I don't have to keep track of 2 pieces of information. I don't have to keep track of, it is active, and now let me go find out later on where do I store when it was last activated or even deactivated, right? I can just use one piece of data that communicates both pieces of information to me.
Oh, I
So, yeah.
see.
Don't
That's
use
really
a Boolean
interesting.
when a timestamp will do.
You can't add this after the fact. That's the interesting part about this, is that you can't, like, if you change your mind and you're like, I've never used this date stamp, I'm always just treating it as a Boolean, I'm just going to convert it all to Booleans to save some. I don't even think you would save any bytes in the database, actually, but just to make the code simpler, you can convert from date stamp to Boolean, but you can't do it the other way around, right? So if you're like, oh, I really wish that we had used a date stamp here so that we knew what day people deactivated their account or what day they, did this or did that. Too late. It can't be fixed after the fact.
Right. That's why at this point, usually whenever I see like a Boolean use in a PR or in the early phases of a system design, like I think basically any sort of a ERD or data model that I'm seeing where I'm seeing Booleans, I'm like, could this be a timestamp instead? And more often than not, it's true. Don't use a Boolean when a timestamp will do.
That made a lot more sense after you explained it. I genuinely thought you meant you just have like your birthday means true and any other date is false, baby.
If it ain't my birthday, it ain't true.
Yeah. But no, that does make sense. But hang on, don't you then have to deal with like what's the empty state? And is it is that null or is that
Well, if you're using, so if you're rolling your own, like to use the cases of storing data in a database and whatnot, if you're rolling your own sort of ORM or whatever it is, or you don't want to use an ORM, maybe if you wanted to, you could store the sort of the zero value, right, of your data, or just store nil. And then the standard library does give you the ability to parse a time value and determine whether that time value is zero or not. There's literally a zero function in the standard library for time. So you could use that, but in most cases, ORMs, I know for a fact GORM, which actually has become, when I have to use an ORM, has become one of my go-tos. It does, it will omit, right, sort of storing, the zero value date for you, right? So any ORM that you want to use typically should give you some of those, as we call it, quality of life, sort of bits and pieces. So, yeah, I think it's totally doable, totally manageable, and I think you get a whole lot more for that, right? For the extra, bytes that you store, even if you. I'm not even sure, like Carl's saying, I'm not sure you've saved that much space over the different data types, but depending on database implementation. But yeah, you get so much more back when you use that timestamp than you do with a bit.
Yeah, now I'm thinking about going back to the time.duration.abs.absolute, that if you were just subtracting the time, like if you were like, I'm looking at the is deleted at column, and I want to know if it was deleted in the last month, and then I'm going to send them an email saying, please come back, or something like that. If you just naively do that subtraction and the time is zero, you'll get the overflow, and you'll need to use time.duration.abs. So please, people, if you're implementing Johnny's thing, use time.duration.abs and send me a royalty of, something fair, nothing, not a lot, just like $100. Like, just a little.
I thought you were gonna say a cup of coffee. Damn, $100.
Do you remember in Back to the Future 2? There's like a part where, Marty McFly is walking through the square, and it's the future. It's the year 2015, and the woman says like, "Hey, can you spare some money for the clock tower?" And he's like, "No, sorry, I can't." And she's like, "Come on, man, it's just $100." Yeah. And I think that with the inflation now, it was really set in 2022. They just sort of made a little error in the timing of the thing.
Oh man, can't even buy a lollipop for $100 anymore, can you?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I also like how in Back to the Future when he goes back and like someone dies in the past. Then he looks at the Polaroid he's taken, and it's kind of like half fading away. And it's like, so at some point there was a semi-transparent tombstone, was there? But to be fair, you would take a photo of that if that happened. Like, yeah, it takes time to cascade through the effects, But I love that.
Yeah, don't look at Back to the Future to reason about time. That's a
yeah.
It's
don't do that to yourself.
Primer you want for that.
Primer is what you want, yeah.
There's also a Spanish one called Time Crimes, which is another one of my favorites. I really recommend that.
Okay.
And actually, the Adam Project is a more recent one, which is kind of like more family-friendly movie, but a time travel. To be honest, I like any film with time travel in it. And it can be a really bad film, and I'll love it. But for some reason, if it's got time travel in it, I'm in.
So have you seen Tenet? You should see Tenet.
Yes.
Because that's a mind trip right there.
Yeah, that's a good
You
one.
might have to watch it a few times. Yeah.
Can I give my complaint?
Watch it backwards.
This is like the nerdiest possible complaint that somebody can have. Okay, so it's Star Trek.
Are you sure
They've
it's
done
more nerdy
millions
than storing a timestamp instead of a boolean? That's
This
quite
is like,
nerdy.
this is so bad. So it's Star Trek, right? They've done 1 million time travel episodes. And in the Star Trek time travel episodes, the rules are always that, like, at the end, you have to sort of get things back to where it was or close enough. There can be, like, little changes, but nothing big. But then they had the Star Trek quote-unquote reboot movie, which was not a reboot movie. It was a time travel movie. And in that movie, and only that movie, they traveled back in time and made a second timeline. And it's fine. Like, you can have time travel rules be that when you go back in time, it creates a new timeline, and then there's 2 things, and so it's okay to kill your grandfather because that's just a different timeline. That is fine if you want that to be the rules. But that's not the rules of Star Trek. If they wanted to reboot and say, okay, it's a new thing, it looks like Star Trek, but it's a parallel universe where there's like different things, that would have been fine too. Like, I think everybody would have been happy. There's like a million Batmans. Nobody thinks that like the Batman in Batman 1989 has to like have some relationship to the Batman in the animated series. They could just be two different universes. It's fine. But then for Star Trek, for some reason, they're like, let's make it a time travel movie and let's make it not use the rules of Star Trek time travel.
Yeah.
It just makes me crazy.
Yeah.
Creative
My
differences.
nerdiest
Creative
complaint about
differences.
movies, I guess.
Nice.
But then
It's a
all the
fair
other
point.
movies in Star Trek, like, it's not like they don't do time travel in Star Trek. They do it all the time, and they have very consistent rules, except for that one movie.
Yeah, that is quite nerdy. I'll give you that. But I'm with you actually. If there's contradictions in films, then I'm just out, and that does apply to time travel films. But there's things like in those, and anytime there's like a horror film, and my partner loves horror films. She's always like, she loves watching that. She loves that whole genre. But if there's like someone's grabbed by a ghost and they're being pulled through the house or something. So at that point, whatever else is going on, at that point, you can physically interact with this thing, whatever it is. So you should be able to attack it. Like, you know, it should. You can't have one without the other. And the other thing is, if you were invisible, which happens in films, you'd also be blind. And this is never the case. Like, light has to hit your retina and be absorbed in order for you to see. And so if that's not happening, if the light's traveling through, then you are blind, basically. So you could be invisible, but you'd also be blind.
Maybe you just you're invisible except for your pupils, and people just don't notice that the pupils are floating. They just think they're like two little gnats or something.
Well, if that's the case, if there's just two retinas floating around, then fine. Then at least it's consistent.
Yeah, that's like a good movie. That's what we all want to
That's
see.
a really
is
good
where
movie.
there's
Floating.
two retinas floating
It's called
around.
Retina. That's the title of the movie.
Yeah.
Retina.
Christopher Nolan could make that. He'd do a really good job. The other thing about Star Trek I like, and my friend Erin Adele made this point as well, it's when they like go onto another ship and they see all this like this alien technology they've never seen before, and they're like, this looks like navigation. This one looks like the energy, and it's like, I can't even use Android. Like I've got an iPhone. I don't even know how. If I pick up someone's phone, I'm like, yeah, you do it. It's like, what do you mean?
This is
it's
like
Mr.
one of the
Data,
problems
can
of the
you?
21st century? Yeah, that it used to be when you went to somebody's house and they had a television, you knew how to turn on their television and turn it to whatever channel you wanted to watch. Now when somebody comes over to your house, like somebody's got to take care of your house because you're going out of town, you have to leave like a 5-page memo. It's like, this is the remote that turns on the TV. This is the one for the Roku. This is the one for the stereo. This is the other one for the stereo. For if the first one isn't working, you have to push this one to like switch the channel. It's a mess. Somebody needs
I
to
just
do
want
a
voice
remote
control. Can I have voice control for all the things? Can I just get do away with remotes? Just voice control.
Yeah, but then do you say what's the trigger word? I don't want to say the trigger words in case people listen to this on those devices, and then we
Peanut
can
butter.
hack. Okay, so you get to choose your own.
Yeah, why
Why
not?
would you choose that? Why do you want peanut butter though, Johnny? You have to whisper.
That sucks because
You should make it something you don't ever want. So like licorice, it's like, well, I would never ask for licorice.
There you go.
fine.
I hate licorice.
that's an unpopular opinion if I've ever heard one.
I hate licorice. Bling! Oh no, I was just telling someone. I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean. No, I wasn't talking to you. Oh,
Would
I'm
you like some peanut butter?
Oh, yeah. But that. Okay. Well, that's, I'm afraid, all the time we've got today. But
Is it?
Whole new. Well, yes, because we respect the timeline on Go Time.
We're gonna fix all of the connectivity errors.
Yeah. To be fair, though, if everything works and all the files are collected in the final version of this that goes out, this will be seamless. And the editors, they're so good, so that could well happen. I hope it does. That's all the time we've got, I'm afraid, today. Thank you so much, Johnny Borsico. Always a pleasure. Okay, I thought you were going to say, I was leaving space for you to say something nice about me, but no, that's fine. And thank you so much, Carl Johnson, for joining us. I'm sure you'll come back. I hope another
More
time.
popular opinions. I gotta stop doing that. Johnny, good to
We'll
be
see.
on an episode with you. So we're both in Baltimore, and I'd love to start coming back to the Baltimore Golang meetings as soon as my children let me leave the house. So
Sounds good.
That's lovely. Yeah. Do you want to say something nice about me, or we're just gonna go 2 for 2 on the old?
Matt,
Yep.
you've done an exceedingly adequate job at hosting.
I'll take it.
thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time, dear listener, on Go Time. Bye. Can you figure out how to turn on the warp drive, Mr. Data? No, I can't. I can't because I've got absolutely no idea what any of this means. It's all in alien. I can't even speak Spanish. What chance have I got?
It's Android, sir, not iOS.
It's not iOS, so I can't do it. What button
Brilliant.
should I push that will not make this crash? Do I push Leave Studio?
Yeah, and then it will stay. I mean, ideally, we normally wait till, mind you, yeah, it will never reach 100 if we keep recording more content.
No, we can stop the recording.
I'll
If you
stop
stop the
there.
recording,